The barn was already on fire when the old dog broke into a run. No one called him, no one saw him go, but what he dragged out of the flames made grown men cry. The sky had been grumbling all day, thick clouds rolling across the hills like smoke. It was the kind of summer evening where the air felt heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. Crickets had gone quiet. Horses near the fence pawed the ground nervously, and then, without warning, the sky cracked wide open. A streak of lightning tore across the heavens, blinding white and full of fury. It struck a power pole just a few yards from the McAllister family barn. The wood exploded in a shower of sparks, wires snapping and whipping like angry snakes. One spark found dry hay, and within seconds the barn caught fire. At first it was just a flicker, an orange pulse inside the shadows of the old structure. But hay burns fast. The flames leapt upward, like they'd been waiting for this moment. They found dry boards, weathered straw, and old tractor fuel. A muffled boom echoed through the valley as the fire spread greedy and wild. Inside the farmhouse, Claire McAllister had just set down a tray of lemonade when she noticed the glow through the window. Her husband, Doug, was already running. He didn't even grab his boots. His voice tore through the house. "The barn, it's on fire!" Claire followed him out into the yard, heart pounding. Across the gravel driveway, the barn was lit up like a bonfire, flames licking at the sky. The horses, in the nearby paddock, were screaming, eyes wide, hooves thundering against the fence. Doug ran to unlock the gate, trying to calm them. Claire fumbled with her phone, calling 911, her fingers shaking too much to hit the right buttons at first. The dispatcher picked up. Claire could barely get the words out. "It's the McAllister ranch. The barn's burning. Please hurry." Sirens were already echoing from the highway when neighbors began to arrive. Pickup trucks skidded into the yard. Men and women jumped out with shovels, buckets, anything they could grab. The wind was rising, feeding the flames. Someone shouted to check the propane tank. Another ran for the garden hose, even though it was clear that water wouldn't be enough. The first fire truck came screaming down the dirt road, kicking up dust and gravel. Firefighters in heavy gear jumped down, barking orders and pulling hoses. Water blasted toward the blaze, turning to steam before it even touched the wood. In all the chaos, Claire looked around, trying to count heads. Doug was helping a neighbor with the fence. The horses were safe. People were yelling. Lights were flashing. But something didn't feel right. A chill ran up her spine. "Where's Eli?" she said aloud, but no one heard her. She turned to the house. His bike was still leaned against the porch. His favorite sneakers were by the back door. Her voice rose. "Eli! Eli!" Doug turned. "What?" "He was feeding the goats," Claire said, her face going pale. "He went out to the barn after dinner." A silence fell for one horrible second. Then Doug ran. The fire roared louder, climbing higher, like it had just been told something worth celebrating. No one saw the small figure still huddled inside. No one saw the goats pressed against him, trembling. And no one saw the old German shepherd. Not yet. Not until it was already too late to stop him. The rain had started just after supper, light at first, then steady, soaking the fields and turning the dirt roads into slick ribbons of mud. The storm had rolled in without warning, the way summer storms sometimes do. Thunder grumbled low in the distance, and lightning flashed across the hills like someone had torn the sky with a knife. Inside the small white farmhouse, at the edge of town, everything was quiet, except for the soft hum of the old ceiling fan, and the ticking of the wall clock. Deputy Tom Granger sat in his worn recliner, boots off, his tired feet resting on the edge of the coffee table. The television was on, but the volume was low. He wasn't really watching. His mind was elsewhere, drifting between memories and the quiet peace of retirement. Beside him, curled up on a thick old blanket, lay Ranger. The German shepherd had grayed around the muzzle, and his joints didn't move quite like they used to, but his eyes still had that steady focus, that spark of alertness that never really faded in a working dog. Ranger had been with Tom for 8 years on the force. They'd tracked down suspects through swamps, found missing hikers, sniffed out hidden stashes of drugs and weapons. When the city cut the canine program, Tom had taken him home without question. They had earned each other, and neither had let go since. Tom reached down and scratched Ranger behind the ears. The dog let out a contented sigh. "You've earned your rest, old boy," Tom said softly. "No more chases, no more calls." Lightning flashed again, followed by a louder crack of thunder. Ranger's ears twitched. His nose lifted. Tom didn't notice at first, not until Ranger stood up suddenly, all stiffness forgotten. He sniffed the air, head turning sharply toward the front door. Then he growled low in his throat. Tom sat up. "What is it?" Before he could finish the question, Ranger was off the blanket and pacing. He let out one sharp bark, not the kind he used when he wanted dinner or needed to go out. This was different, urgent, focused. Another flash lit the room. Tom moved toward the door, confused. Then Ranger bolted. The screen door flew open, slamming against the side of the house. Tom shouted after him, "Ranger, hey!" But the dog was already halfway across the yard, paws churning up mud, eyes locked on something far away. He wasn't just running. He was tracking. Tom grabbed his coat and keys, still barefoot, and rushed outside. Rain stung his face. The dog was already disappearing over the hill behind the barn. "Where are you going?" Tom muttered, climbing into his truck. He started the engine, tires spinning on wet gravel. As he turned toward the main road, the police radio came to life with static, then a voice. "All units, structure fire reported at the McAllister ranch. Full response requested. Repeat, barn fire at the McAllister property." Tom's stomach dropped. That was over 12 miles away, and it was exactly where Ranger was heading. Somehow, the old dog knew. Something had pulled him out of his blanket, out of his retirement, and sent him running into the storm. And Tom, heart pounding, followed him into the dark. Tom's truck bounced down the soaked gravel road, windshield wipers working overtime as rain blurred the world outside. The tires slid more than once, the back end fishtailing through puddles. But Tom didn't slow down. He gripped the wheel tight, eyes darting left and right, searching the fields ahead for any sign of Ranger. The headlights cut through the misty dark, lighting up the wet grass and fence posts. Thunder boomed again, closer now. Somewhere out there, his old partner was running through this mess, following something only he could sense. Tom leaned toward the radio and clicked the mic. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Granger. I've got a situation. My K9 partner has taken off from my property and is heading east, fast. Any reports out that way?" Static hissed, followed by a reply. "Deputy, we've got a code 43. Barn fire at the McAllister ranch. Full structure involvement. Units are en route." Tom's heart skipped. He tightened his grip on the mic. "Confirm the location," he said. "Repeat, McAllister ranch. Flames visible from the main road. Caller reports possible entrapment." Entrapment. That word sent a chill down his spine. Someone might still be inside. And that was exactly where Ranger was heading. Tom let out a low breath and floored the gas pedal. The engine growled, and the truck surged forward. He passed familiar landmarks in a blur. The old mailbox that leaned too far. The split oak tree by the fence line. The rain began to ease, but the wind picked up, sweeping low fog across the road. He remembered Ranger's face, just before he bolted. The sudden alertness, the nose in the air, the bark that hadn't been about fear or confusion. It had been a warning, a call to action. Ranger wasn't running away. He was going somewhere he believed he was needed. But how did he know? Tom thought of all the times Ranger had found what no one else could. Missing kids, hidden contraband, people buried under rubble after the flood 2 years ago. It didn't make sense, not fully, but he'd learned long ago not to question the dog's instincts. Ranger knew things, felt things, sometimes before the call even came through. As he turned onto the main county road, a glow caught Tom's eye. In the distance, past the rise of the next hill, the sky flickered orange and gold. It wasn't lightning. It was fire. "Jesus," Tom whispered. He was right. The barn was burning. Even from here he could see the smoke, thick and black, curling into the night sky. Blue and red lights flashed near the property, casting eerie shadows across the wet fields. Tom grabbed the radio again. "Dispatch, I'm approaching the McAllister site now. Be advised, my canine may already be on location. Repeat, Ranger may be at the fire." He ended the call and pressed harder on the gas. The fire was closer now. He could see silhouettes moving near the house. Firefighters spraying water. Neighbors standing in clusters, faces pale. And somewhere, in all that smoke and panic, was his dog. Tom whispered like a prayer, "Please, buddy, don't go in there alone." The barn was fully on fire by the time Tom pulled up. Flames poured through the broken roof, lighting up the night sky with a terrible glow. Smoke twisted into the air, thick and dark, making it hard to see anything clearly. The heat hit Tom the moment he stepped out of the truck, like opening an oven door too fast. It pushed against his skin and filled his nose with the choking stench of burning wood and hay. Firefighters were everywhere, shouting to each other over the roar of the blaze. Hoses hissed and steamed, but the water seemed to vanish the moment it touched the flames. Neighbors stood in clusters, some barefoot, some still in pajamas, watching in horror as the old barn that had stood for generations turned into a furnace. Tom spotted Claire McAllister near the edge of the yard, her face wet with rain and tears. She clutched her phone in one hand, the other held tight by her husband Doug, who was shouting something to a firefighter. Claire's eyes were wide, wild, like someone stuck in a nightmare that wouldn't end. Tom rushed over. "Claire, Doug, what happened?" Claire turned to him, her lips trembling. "It was lightning," she said, her voice thin. "Hit the power line, the barn it just lit up." Tom looked toward the barn again. One of the walls had already collapsed inward, throwing sparks into the air. There was no way anyone could still be in there. Not now. Not with the fire that high. Then he heard Doug's voice crack. "We can't find Eli," he said. "He went out to check on the goats after dinner. He always comes right back. But he didn't. We thought he came in. We thought he was in his room." Tom felt his stomach twist. He turned to the firefighters, already waving his arms. "Kid might still be inside," he yelled. "Check the stalls, the back pens." One of the captains looked at him with wide eyes. Ranger came out of the dark like a ghost, soaked from the rain but moving with purpose. His paws hit the muddy driveway hard as he ran straight past the gathered crowd. Firefighters turned at the sound of claws on gravel, surprised to see a dog charging toward the burning barn. One of them stepped forward, arms out, trying to stop him. Hey, get that dog back!" But Ranger didn't slow. His eyes were locked on the flames, nose working fast, tail stiff behind him. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for someone. Tom ran up behind the firefighter, breathless. "Let him go," he shouted. "He's trained for this." The firefighter turned, confused, but Tom didn't stop to explain. His heart was pounding, not just from the sprint, but from what he knew in his gut. Ranger had picked up something, some scent or signal no one else could see or hear, and he wasn't acting on instinct alone. He was choosing to go in. The barn groaned under the weight of its own burning beams. The fire had moved fast, fed by dry wood, hay, and wind. Flames curled through the roof like snakes, and smoke poured from every crack in the old boards. Somewhere inside, something popped loudly, and a burst of sparks shot out the back. Ranger reached the wide front doors just as another support beam crashed down inside. The heat blasted out toward him, but he didn't flinch. He ducked through the opening, disappearing into the smoke. Tom stood frozen for a second, his mouth dry. "Please God, don't let that be the last time I see him." A firefighter ran up, pulling at Tom's arm. "Was that your dog?" Tom nodded. "Retired canine. Best one I ever worked with." "Then he's got guts," the man said, looking at the blaze. "That barn's coming down soon." Inside, the world was fire and smoke. Ranger kept low, staying beneath the thickest of the fumes, his nose leading the way. He moved quickly past the scorched walls and burning piles of hay, heading toward the back stalls. The air was thick, choking, but he kept going. A faint sound reached his ears, a cough, then a whimper. Ranger turned sharply, paws slipping for a moment on the ash-covered floor, then found his footing again. The smell grew stronger. Fear, smoke, sweat, and something else. Goat. 2 of them. He followed the sound to a corner where the roof hadn't fallen yet. There, under a pile of boards and next to a feed bin, was a small shape. Eli. The boy was curled up, arms wrapped around 2 tiny goats. His face was black with soot, and his eyes fluttered open at the sound of Ranger's low growl. "Ranger?" he croaked, blinking. The dog moved closer and nudged Eli gently with his nose. The boy started to cry. "I knew someone would come," he whispered. Ranger didn't make a sound. He turned and grabbed the boy's sleeve in his teeth, pulling just hard enough to say, "It's time to go." The fire roared above them, and the walls creaked dangerously, but Ranger didn't stop. He had found who he was looking for. And now, he was going to bring him home. The heat inside the barn was unbearable. Smoke wrapped around everything, thick as tar, hiding the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Every few seconds, a piece of wood cracked and fell, sending sparks flying like angry bees. Flames crawled across the rafters, licking the beams as if trying to pull the whole building down. But Ranger didn't stop. He kept his head low, staying under the worst of the smoke, his nose working fast. Each breath hurt, but he had learned long ago how to push past pain. His paws moved carefully over the hot ground, ash sticking to his fur, ears twitching at every creak and groan of the old barn. He had been in worse places, dark alleys, drug houses, storm zones, but nothing like this. Still, he moved forward, driven by something deeper than training. He knew there was someone inside. Someone small, someone scared. He let out one sharp bark. Nothing. Then he barked again, louder. A sound came back through the smoke, a soft cry, a cough, the smallest voice. "Help." Ranger turned and moved toward it, faster now, weaving between burning boards and broken tools. His nose caught the scent he was looking for, sweat, fear, and something warm and alive. The boy. He reached the far stall, the one behind the collapsed beam, and stopped. Through the smoke, he saw him. Eli. The boy was crouched low, his arms wrapped around 2 tiny goats. His face was streaked with ash and tears. His hair was damp with sweat. He wasn't crying loudly, just small, quiet sobs, like he was trying to be brave but couldn't anymore. The goats were shaking, pressed against his sides, their little bodies trembling. Ranger stepped forward, letting out a soft growl, not in anger, but to let the boy know he was there. Eli's head snapped up. He blinked through the smoke. "Ranger?" The dog barked once, sharp and clear. The boy's mouth opened in shock, then turned into a smile so full of relief, it made the corners of his eyes shine, even through the soot. "You found me." Ranger stepped forward, sniffing the beam that had fallen across the stall. It was too heavy for Eli to move on his own, but it had left just enough space at the bottom for Ranger to crawl through. He squeezed under it, ignoring the way his hips scraped the wood, and reached Eli. He nuzzled the boy's arm, checking for injuries. Eli winced but nodded. "I'm okay," he whispered, "but they're scared." Ranger licked the boy's hand, then turned and backed out the way he came. He barked again, calling Eli to follow. The boy hesitated. The flames behind them roared louder, and part of the roof gave a loud groan. Eli picked up one goat, then the other, holding them tight. "I'll come," he said. "Just don't leave." Ranger stood on the other side of the beam, waiting. When the boy finally crawled through, dragging the goats behind him, Ranger stayed close, his body low, always watching the shadows above. He had found the boy. Now came the hardest part. Getting them all out alive. The fire was louder now, a deep roar that filled every corner of the barn like the growl of a giant beast. Smoke stung Ranger's eyes, but he didn't stop. He could feel the heat pushing against him, growing stronger with every passing second. The roof above creaked again, sending flakes of ash falling like black snow. Eli was shaking, still clutching the 2 baby goats. They huddled behind him, bleating softly. too weak and scared to move. The beam that had trapped them had shifted when Ranger squeezed under, but there was still debris blocking the way out. Charred boards, broken hay bales, old tools half melted by the fire. The path was too tight for the boy to crawl through. Ranger stepped forward and began to dig. His paws scraped at the splintered wood, moving fast despite the pain. His claws caught on nails, but he pulled anyway, dragging old pieces out of the way. When his teeth could get a grip, he used those too. Bits of hay flew into the air, mixing with smoke and ash. Eli watched in silence, tears running down his soot-covered face. Ranger paused only once to check on the boy. He nudged Eli gently with his nose, then went back to work. At last, there was a space just big enough for a child to crawl through. Smoke swirled around them, thick and choking, but the air near the gap was a little clearer. Ranger turned to Eli and barked once, low and firm. The boy didn't move. "I'm scared," Eli whispered, his voice shaking. "What if we don't make it?" Ranger didn't bark again. He didn't need to. He stepped forward and gently bit the edge of the boy's sweatshirt. Not hard, just enough to give a tug. Eli understood. "You want me to come with you?" he said. Ranger tugged again, then let go and licked the boy's hand. Eli nodded slowly. "Okay, I trust you." He tucked one of the goats under each arm and began to crawl, following the dog. The space was tight, and the heat pressed in from above like a heavy blanket. But Ranger led the way, stopping every few feet to look back and make sure the boy was still coming. Halfway through, Eli's voice broke through the smoke. "You used to come to my school," he said. "I remember you. You were in the gym with your vest on. They said you saved people." Ranger glanced back, his ears twitching. The boy smiled faintly. "You came for me," he whispered. Ranger gave a low huff, then pressed forward again. Behind them, the barn groaned louder. Another piece of the roof gave way with a crash, sending sparks flying over the place they had just left. Time was running out. But Ranger kept moving. One paw in front of the other, through fire and fear, he guided the boy and his animals toward the light. Because that's what heroes do, even when no one tells them to. The barn door was in sight now, just a few yards away. Through the thick smoke, Eli could see the flashing red and white lights outside, and the blurry shapes of people running. The air was still hot and heavy, but he could breathe a little easier. He kept crawling, his arms wrapped around the two baby goats, his legs shaking with every push forward. Ranger stayed ahead of him, glancing back often to make sure the boy was still there. His sides heaved with every breath, and his paws left dark prints on the scorched floor. The heat had singed the fur on his legs, and ash clung to his face like paint, but he didn't stop. Then it happened. A sharp crack echoed above them, louder than anything else, and in a single, terrifying moment, a massive timber gave way. The beam, still burning at both ends, came crashing down between them and the door. It slammed into the ground with a deafening thud, blocking the exit completely. Sparks flew into the air, and a wall of flame followed, leaping up like a monster awoken. Eli screamed and pulled the goats close. Ranger turned sharply, barking wildly. Outside, firefighters saw the flash and heard the crash. "Collapse!" someone shouted. Two men rushed forward toward the barn door, but the fire pushed them back. The flames were too high, the heat too intense. The captain yelled for more water, and hoses roared to life again, spraying the door, trying to keep the fire from swallowing what was left. Tom was there too, eyes wide, searching the smoke. "Come on, Ranger," he whispered. "Get him out." Inside, Ranger paced back and forth for a moment, looking at the beam, looking at Eli, his mind working. He backed up a few steps, then charged the edge of the burning timber, snapping at a loose piece with his teeth. The wood cracked, then rolled slightly, just enough. He turned and barked sharply at the boy. Eli didn't hesitate. He dropped one goat through the gap, then the other, then crawled after them on his elbows and knees. The flames were licking closer now, eating away at the floor, filling the stall behind them with choking smoke. Ranger grabbed the back of Eli's shirt with his teeth and pulled, dragging the boy the last few feet. Then, All at once, they burst through the smoke. Eli tumbled forward onto the wet ground just outside the barn door, coughing, his arms wrapping around the goats. Firefighters reached him first, lifting him away from the burning structure. One wrapped a blanket around him, another checked his face for burns. But everyone froze when they saw Ranger. The dog stumbled out after Eli, his legs trembling, his head low. He walked a few steps, then collapsed on the ground beside the boy. His eyes stayed open, but his chest moved slowly. Each breath was a struggle. Eli reached for him. "Ranger," he whispered, tears cutting clean lines through the soot on his cheeks. "You did it. You saved me." The firefighters stood still, their faces wet, not from the rain or sweat, but from something else. None of them had ever seen anything like it. A dog running through fire. And not for glory, but for love. The rain had almost stopped, but the steam rising from the soaked ground made the night feel heavy. The barn still burned behind them, though the fire was slowly dying. Firefighters kept spraying the smoking structure, working to make sure no flames returned. The air was filled with the sound of hissing water, quiet sobs, and the soft bleating of two frightened goats. Eli sat on the ground wrapped in a thick blanket, shivering. His face was covered in soot, and he coughed with nearly every breath. A paramedic knelt beside him, placing a mask gently over his nose and mouth. Another checked his arms and legs for burns or cuts. There were scrapes, and a bruise on his shoulder, but nothing worse. He was going to be okay. The goats were safe too, tucked beside him, trembling but unharmed. Someone had brought a towel and draped it over them, and Eli clutched the fabric tightly, holding both animals close. But everyone's eyes were on something else. Just a few feet away, lying still in the mud and ash, was Ranger. His fur was soaked and dark with soot. His legs were stretched out, motionless. His chest moved, but just barely. His eyes were half open, unfocused. A firefighter slowly walked over, then dropped to his knees in front of the dog. He looked like he'd seen war. His hands hovered over Ranger's body, not sure where to touch, afraid it might hurt. "He's not moving," the man whispered. Another firefighter stepped up and wiped his eyes with the back of his glove. "He got them all out," he said, voice shaking. "The kid, the goats, all of them." A hush fell over the small crowd. Even the people who had been shouting and moving moments before stood still now. There was something sacred about the scene, something too real and too big for words. A dog had walked into fire. Not for glory, not because someone told him to, but because he knew someone needed help. Tom pushed through the crowd, soaked and shaking, and dropped to his knees beside Ranger. "Buddy," he said, barely able to get the word out. A medic moved in with a stethoscope, gently pressing it against Ranger's chest. Everyone held their breath. "There's a heartbeat," the medic said. "It's weak, but he's still fighting." Tom let out a shaky breath, reaching down to stroke the dog's ear. "You hold on," he whispered. "You hear me? You hold on." Eli turned toward them, eyes wide and wet. He didn't speak, just reached out and laid a small hand on Ranger's paw. The rain started again, just a soft drizzle, almost gentle. Somewhere in the distance, a second fire truck pulled in, its lights flashing red against the trees, but no one was watching it. They were all watching Ranger, and not one of them would ever forget what they saw that night. Not the smoke, not the flames, but the old dog lying in the ashes. The one who went in when no one else could. The one who brought them home. As Ranger lay still in the cooling mud, his chest barely rising with each breath, Tom sat beside him with one hand resting gently on his back. The other hand wiped tears from his eyes, though he wasn't the only one. Around them, the firefighters worked in silence now, voices low, movements slower, as if they knew they were standing near something sacred. Tom looked at the dog who had once been his partner, his teammate, and over time, his closest friend. And as the rain continued to fall, his mind drifted back through the years they had shared. He remembered the night Ranger caught his first armed suspect. It had been dark, back when Tom was new to the 9 unit. The suspect had a gun and had vanished into a wooded field. Tom had hesitated at the edge, heart pounding. But Ranger hadn't. He went in without fear, weaving through trees and brush until he cornered the man. When the suspect raised the weapon, Ranger lunged. No hesitation. No command needed. He brought the man down and held him until backup arrived. Tom had never forgotten that moment. It was the first time he truly understood what kind of dog he had been given. There was the flood 2 summers later, when a river had spilled over its banks and swept through 3 counties. A child had been reported missing, last seen near the edge of the rising water. Boats couldn't reach the area, too dangerous, but Ranger swam. Against the current, through mud and debris, he followed the scent across flooded farmland and found the girl clinging to a broken tree. She had been too weak to call out, but Ranger found her anyway. Then there was the wildfire in the canyon. The smoke had choked the air for miles, and the wind made the flames unpredictable. Everyone had been ordered to evacuate, but someone said an old man was still out there with his horses. No one knew where he had gone. Ranger did. Tom remembered the 2 of them climbing over fallen branches and blackened grass, Ranger leading the way. They found the man half-conscious, trying to free a trapped colt. Together, they got him out. And of course, there was the school. A lockdown. Gunshots. Children huddled in classrooms. Ranger had cleared hallways one by one, moving like he knew what was at stake. He barked only once during the entire operation, when he found a wounded teacher and stayed by her side until help arrived. Later, she sent Tom a letter. She wrote, "I've never believed in angels before, but I do now." He had 4 legs. Ranger had done all of it without complaint, without reward. He never asked for more than a bowl of food, a warm place to sleep, and Tom's hand resting gently on his head at the end of each day. Retirement hadn't changed who he was. The uniform came off, but the heart stayed the same. When the sirens faded, when the badge was hung up, Ranger still listened for the sounds of someone in need. That's why he had run through the storm tonight. That's why he had gone into the fire. Because Ranger was never just a dog. He was a protector, a guardian, a hero. And even as his strength faded, that fire inside him had never gone out. The veterinary clinic was quiet, except for the soft beeping of the machines and the distant murmur of voices behind closed doors. The rain had finally stopped, but everything outside still smelled like smoke and wet earth. Inside, the lights were low, and the air was filled with the sharp scent of disinfectant and something heavier, worry. Ranger lay on a metal table, barely moving. His fur was still damp, singed in places, and his breathing was shallow, each inhale slower than the last. His eyes were closed. A blanket covered most of his body, and an oxygen mask was strapped gently around his muzzle. Tubes ran from his front legs, and a monitor beside him kept track of every heartbeat, every breath. Tom sat in a plastic chair pulled close to the table. He hadn't spoken much since they arrived. He hadn't wanted to leave Ranger's side, not for a second. His hand rested on the dog's paw, thumb brushing the pads slowly, like he could will him back just by being there. The vet had already said it didn't look good. Smoke inhalation, exhaustion, possible internal injuries. His body had given everything it had to get that boy out, and now it was hanging on by a thread. Tom leaned forward, his forehead nearly touching Ranger's. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care about being strong right now. "You did good, partner," he whispered, voice shaking. "You found him. You got him out." Ranger didn't move. Tom closed his eyes. He thought about all the calls they had answered together, all the nights out in the cold, all the quiet drives home. He remembered the time Ranger had gotten into the back of the patrol car, before Tom even opened the door, like he couldn't wait to get to work. He remembered their first arrest, their last one. The way Ranger used to rest his head on Tom's knee during long shifts. "You can rest now," Tom said. "You've earned it." The monitor beeped again, slow, steady. A nurse walked by the room, paused, and looked in. She gave Tom a small nod, but her face was tired, her eyes gentle with the kind of sympathy that comes from seeing too many goodbyes. Tom looked back down at his friend. "I love you, boy," he whispered. For a long time, there was nothing. Then, just when the silence grew too heavy to bear, Ranger stirred. It was barely a movement at first, A twitch of one ear, then a small shift in his paw. Tom leaned in, not daring to hope. Ranger's eyes opened. Not fully, just a sliver, but enough. Then he gave a sound, a faint, raspy bark, so soft it could have been a whisper, but it was real. It was him. Tom laughed through tears, wiping his face quickly. "There you are," he said. "You're not done yet, are you?" Ranger didn't answer, but his eyes stayed open. And in that moment, with the machine still beeping and the scent of fire still lingering in the air, something shifted. Hope returned. Not loud, not bright, but steady, just like Ranger. The town square had never seen such a crowd on a weekday. Folding chairs filled the patch of grass in front of the old courthouse, and people stood along the sidewalks, some with umbrellas still open from the light drizzle that had passed earlier. Children sat on their parents' laps, firemen lined the back row, and even a few reporters from nearby towns had come with notepads and cameras. The American flag above the building flapped gently in the wind, and in front of the podium, decorated with sunflowers and red ribbons, stood a boy and a dog. Eli held one of his goats in his arms. The little animal wiggled now and then, but the boy kept a gentle grip, his face calm but serious. His burns had healed quickly, and the bruises were nearly gone, but his eyes held something new, something older, deeper. He had seen more than most kids ever would, and he had come through it stronger. Ranger lay at his feet, resting but alert. His coat had been brushed and cleaned, though the singed patches still showed along his side. He didn't seem to mind. His breathing was steady, and his eyes moved slowly across the crowd, watching, taking in every detail, just like he always had. Tom stood behind them, his hand resting on Ranger's back. His uniform was pressed, his badge shining, but his face was softer today. He wasn't just a deputy. He was a man who had nearly lost his best friend and had gotten him back. When it was time, Eli stepped up to the microphone. A hush fell over the crowd. "My name is Eli," he said, his voice steady. "A week ago, I was trapped in our barn. The fire was really bad. I didn't think I was going to get out, but then Ranger came." He paused and looked down at the dog beside him. The goat in his arms gave a soft bleat. "He found me," Eli continued. "He didn't leave me behind. He got me and the goats out, even when the fire was coming down around us. He didn't have to do it. He's old, he's retired, but he still came, because that's who he is." The crowd was quiet, many with tears in their eyes. Eli held up a small, shiny object. "This is Ranger's new collar. We made it special." He bent down and carefully clipped it around the dog's neck. The tag was simple, silver, and engraved with 4 words: "Always on duty." Ranger didn't react much. He just looked up at the boy, then settled his head back on his paws. But everyone in the crowd understood what that moment meant. Tom stepped forward next. He didn't say much, just thanked the town, the fire crews, the vet, and everyone who had prayed, helped, or showed up. Then he looked down at Ranger and smiled. "Some fires you fight with water," he said. "Others you fight with heart." The crowd clapped, not loudly, but warmly, with a kind of respect that went deeper than words. That night, the square was quiet again, but in every home, every heart, the story of one old dog and one small boy would be told for years to come. And as Ranger lay beside Tom on the porch later, watching the stars blink to life, he didn't need a medal or a headline. He had done his job, because real heroes never stop showing up. Some heroes wear badges, some wear fur. If Ranger's bravery touched your heart, give this story a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable animal heroes.